Hey everybody, Chatty here. For those of you who don't know, today is my dad, Dan Bohai's very first ever birthday from heaven. So I've been obviously with my whole family, been reflecting and thinking about favorite stories from my dad's life and ministry. And I just thought I'd make a really short video of one of the highlights as I've been thinking about my dad today on October 22nd. And like that moment where he and I had, we sort of, our relationship transitioned when I sort of became of age. We were ministering. I have two memories I get to share. Um, when I was young, I really thought that my voice was super important. Uh, Maybe a little bit of youthful pride and zeal and arrogance. And so I had this real ambition and desire to get to be the guy that opens the word and who gets to preach behind the pulpit. And a lot of my early years in ministry, when I was in my early 20s, was on the road with my dad. And I got to travel with him. I got to go to some, what was it, 17 states or 18, 20 states in ministry. Some of it alone, but a lot of it with my dad as the worship guy or the guy who would quote a bunch of scripture before he preached or whatever he needed me to do. It was such a joy in those early years of my life to travel with him. But I'll never forget our longest ministry stint away from home together was an 18-day journey throughout eastern Florida, like just all up and down the coast. Dad had uh, a whole tour lined up of a district over there in the Nazarene Church, and I got to go with him and minister. And I'd always, again, I'm like, what was I? 25, so young, so full of zeal and passion, thinking that, I was just ready to be the guy. When is he going to call on me to be the guy that preaches? And I I may or may not have put passive aggressive pressure on my dad in those early years to sort of give me a shot. And I'll never forget, we were after ministry, we were in the car and we were just sitting in one of it in his truck. We drove out there and he said, "Son, you're like a pent up stallion, just ready to minister, ready to preach." And when he named the angst, it was just sort of this unspoken thing between a father and a son, kind of like, "Hey, come on, get me in there, coach." And he gave me plenty of opportunities. I always just wanted more, especially as a young guy. And I'll never forget when dad was able to name the tension, something broke in our relationship and it was never the same. There was an understanding between a father and a son of who God made each of us to be uniquely. And dad, from that moment on, and well before that moment, but for me as a growing adult and then eventually a father, obviously a husband, a father of 4 kids, and a pastor and a minister, that was a watershed moment when I felt like my dad finally was able to name something in his son that really relieved a lot of the pressure, like the angst to want to hurry up and to find my place in my role. When dad was able to speak identity and blessing, I'll never forget that moment there in Florida. We were gone 18 days. That was a long time. I don't think Haley and I had any children yet. Regardless, it was a long time to be away from my wife, and obviously for him, for his whole family there in Kansas City area. The second memory, I don't remember if I shared this at his memorial that we did. We're coming up on a year on that as well here in a couple weeks. But I'll never forget, we were ministering in northern Michigan. I mean, like the tundra. And we were there with one of our favorite guys ever, Pastor Brian and McConnell. And dad it wasn't even like the special service that night where all of these churches were gathered. It was just a little one-off with a handful of pastors from this area. It was multi-generational. It was multi-denominational. Oh man, this was so important. Another huge moment in transformation in dad and I's relationship. And uh, one of the things that we all know with those that we're in closest relationship with, that we are usually the ones who have a front row seat to the good, the bad, and the ugly. And honestly, if we're honest with each other, we can be the hardest and harshest and most critical to those that we're closest with, because we have the highest level of intimacy and vulnerability and relationship. And so throughout the years, I may or may not, I've spent so much time repenting over this last year, not just because of my attitudes or whatever towards my dad, but just towards anyone that I've ever done life with, as I've been walking such a long journey of healing and restoration, personally, physically, and mentally and emotionally, especially in the light of my dad's tragic passing. And so I realized, especially in my youth, I'm 41, so I've sort of graduated from that phase, I think, is how harsh and quick to make assessments and judgments of someone's heart or motive. And so, a lot of times I would harbor things, what would I say, personality defects, or what we would just call quirks or idiosyncrasies, or things that make you and me, that are a gift, but sometimes with those who we're in closest relationship with, they can get on our nerves. So, needless to say, I didn't always view my dad through the 2 Corinthians 5:16 lens, through the eyes of the cross. Sometimes I just would see his faults or whatever, and he didn't have that many. He was pretty, he didn't have that many. He's an unbelievable dad, but this is a part of the story. So it's so easy, again, when we're in a relationship with those closest to us, to not view them through the lens of grace and through the lens of the gospel, through the lens of the cross and Christ. And so much of that we can transmit for those of us who've had good dads, bad dads, whatever it is. We can really transpose that on those who hold most authority in our lives. And so, again, Dad and I are ministering, and it was a moment I'll never forget, where for so often in our relationship, we kind of related to each other through that lens of father and son, which was right and good. And then we grew, and it was sort of father, still son, but also like friend and companion and co-laborer in the gospel. But this moment in Michigan shook my life. Dad was preaching, or just kind of teaching, actually. And his passage was when the glory departed Israel, and she named the baby boy Ichabod, which means the glory departed. And Dad was just sharing how important it is. Corey Jones had this flagship message on the glory departing as well. Pastor Corey there in Fort Worth, Texas. He was just talking about, with these pastors, how important it is to be a pastor, a spiritual leader that contends for the glory and the presence of God to be manifest in his church, and then on his people and through his people out in the world. And as Dad's teaching this, it was just a real intimate circle. The presence of God, the weightiness of God's glory, of his, he's preaching on the glory of God, teaching these pastors. And it became so heavy, so thick upon me, that I didn't want to disrupt the meeting, because I was starting to get a glimpse of God's hand on my dad's life. It was like in that meeting, as father and son, I could see a moment behind the veil, behind how I related to my dad my whole life, just as a father, then obviously as a friend, but also through that sort of lens of personality traits or things that could get on your nerves, or you could just be flat out just mean to him or to each other. And we all can do this, especially with those we're in closest relationship with. And there was a moment when all of that was erased, and I saw my dad by the Spirit, who he was, and the actual call of God on his life. I'd seen him be used for thousands of amazing, fruitful kingdom stories. And those were amazing. They moved me. But there was a moment that changed, again, our relationship forever. When I could see, and I remember in that meeting, I was like, I got to get out of this room. The presence of God was so heavy on me. I wanted to just hit the floor. But I didn't want to derail what God was imparting to these pastors through my daddy. And so I left. We were in this church, I don't remember which one it was, up in Cadillac, Michigan. And I left the room on my face, and I just waves of weeping and snot. And I began to pray and intercede for what God was using my dad to do, and as he was imparting something to those pastors and leaders of that region. And those are just, it was a moment when I could see beyond the cameras, the action, the light, the likes, the shares, the teaching, the stories, where Jesus let me see who my dad really was to him, and who my dad really was as an instrument of his kingdom and as an instrument of his glory in the gospel. Man, I'll never forget it. Never forget. When he sort of saw me for the first time, that story in Florida. And then several years later, both of us had a lot of different ministry experience under our belt, where I went again with him to Michigan, and I got to see him through the eyes of Jesus and his impact. Say hi. Don't be shy. That's my best little buddy, Ethan. And so this was way longer. I wanted it to be 2 minutes. It's 12. That's like classic preacher Chad. And I haven't been on here for a while, but I would love for you to leave your favorite stories. It can be through the lens of Dan as sort of a spiritual father. It can be the lens of Dan as a friend and encourager. I could have given 10 million stories about how he's been the best. He was the most relentless encouragement in my life. But I just wanted to share these stories, the impact it had when I felt like Dad saw me for the first time, which he'd obviously seen me for a decade, forever before that, but it hit me in Florida. And then when God let me see him and his calling, the mantle, that what God entrusted my dad to carry and steward through ministry in all of his years, and it just changed my life. So I would love to hear hey buddy, I would love to hear your stories. Just say hi to the people. Say hi. Okay, you don't have to move around. You're good. I'd love to hear your stories. Leave it in the comments. You don't have to post a big long video like this, but just as we, again, Dad's first birthday from heaven. So I love him. I miss him so much. I love my mom, Debbie. Reach out to her if you remember. Obviously, all my siblings. April. Sorry, buddy. I'm just doing a video here. Hold that. April, Kristen, and Josh. And we love you guys. Thank you for all your support over all these months and almost coming up on a year of his passing. We love you so much. And we'll see you again here.